March 15, 1943. The bitter wind cuts across the Tunisian desert as dawn breaks over the Afrika Korps positions. German soldiers huddle in their foxholes, gnawing on chunks of black bread so hard it could chip teeth, washing it down with ersatz coffee that tastes more like burnt acorns than anything remotely resembling the real thing. Their rations have dwindled to 2,200 calories a day when they're lucky, often far less. In the distance, American Sherman tanks lumber forward, their crews fortified not just by armor plating, but by something the Wehrmacht could never have anticipated: an abundance of food that would prove more demoralizing to the enemy than any artillery. Barrage. The canvas-covered K-Ration boxes stacked in those American tanks contained more than mere sustenance. Each lightweight package held a psychological weapon that would fundamentally alter how wars were fought and won. Inside those unassuming cardboard containers lay breakfast, dinner, and supper: ham and eggs, beef stew, crackers, jam, coffee, cigarettes, and 4 squares of Hershey's chocolate. To the German soldiers who would soon encounter these rations after capture, surrender, or battlefield discovery, they represented something incomprehensible: a nation so wealthy, so industrially mighty, that it could afford to feed its soldiers better in the field than most civilians ate at home. World War II was not merely a clash of ideologies or military strategies. It was a collision between industrial capacities so vast that the outcome was perhaps inevitable from the moment American factories began their transformation. By 1943, the United States was producing food not just for its own 32 million citizens in uniform and on the home front, but for much of the Allied world. The Lend-Lease program, signed into law by President Roosevelt on March 11, 1941, had evolved into the greatest logistical undertaking in human history. Through this program, America would eventually ship 4.5 million tons of food to the Soviet Union alone, enough to sustain entire armies. The statistics were staggering. By 1943, 10% of America's total food production was flowing overseas to feed Allied forces and civilians. But the true genius of American food as a weapon lay not in its quantity, but in its quality and psychological impact. The German High Command had calculated their war machine based on the assumption that their enemies would fight with the same material constraints that plagued their own forces. They could not have imagined an adversary that devoted an entire ship, a floating ice cream factory, capable of producing 500 gallons per day, to boosting the morale of sailors fighting in the Pacific Theater. When Japanese intelligence officers learned of this ice cream barge, the news reportedly caused one general to lose hope entirely. The symbolic message was unmistakable. America possessed such overwhelming industrial surplus that it could afford to manufacture frozen dessert in a war zone where Japan's own soldiers were starving on handfuls of rice. The development of the K-Ration exemplified American ingenuity applied to warfare. Created in 1940 by physiologist Ansel Keys, each ration was scientifically designed to deliver 3,000 calories while weighing only 2 pounds. But beyond the caloric mathematics lay something more profound. These meals represented the democratization of nutrition. American soldiers in the Philippines ate the same quality food as those landing on Normandy beaches. German field rations, by contrast, varied drastically based on supply line availability, often consisting of little more than dark bread, margarine, and thin soup. In prisoner-of-war camps across America, captured German soldiers experienced a transformation that would echo through history. Of the 425,000 German POWs held in 700 camps throughout the United States, many would later describe their time in American captivity as the best-fed period of their entire military service. They received between 3,500 and 4,000 calories daily, more than most German civilians had seen since before the war began. Fresh beef, fried chicken, oranges, ice cream, unlimited coffee, and American cigarettes became their daily reality. Many gained 50 pounds or more during their captivity, a physical manifestation of the industrial disparity between the two nations. Wehrmacht Obergefreiter Hans Schemmel, captured in Italy in 1944, would later write in his diary, "The Americans feed us better than we fed ourselves. This morning we had real eggs, not the powder we knew in the Wehrmacht. Fresh milk, white bread with butter, not the ersatz margarine. I begin to understand why they are winning this war. They fight with full stomachs, while we fought with empty ones." His words, preserved in U.S. Army records, captured the dawning realization spreading through Axis forces worldwide. They were not merely fighting American soldiers, they were fighting American abundance. The D-Ration chocolate bar, manufactured by Hershey's according to strict Army specifications, became perhaps the most potent symbol of this abundance. Each 4-ounce bar was designed to taste a little better than a boiled potato, deliberately unpalatable to prevent soldiers from eating their emergency rations, except in dire circumstances. Yet, to enemy forces who discovered these chocolate bars, they represented luxury beyond imagination. German soldiers had not seen real chocolate in years, their own rations consisting of a bitter substitute made from acorns and sawdust. When they bit into genuine American chocolate, they tasted not just cocoa and sugar, but the industrial might of a nation that could afford to feed its military delicacies while their own forces subsisted on ersatz everything. The psychological warfare implications were not lost on American commanders. General Dwight Eisenhower understood that well-fed soldiers fought harder, marched farther, and maintained higher morale than their malnourished counterparts. But more importantly, he grasped that American food abundance sent a clear message to both allies and enemies. This was a nation with resources so vast that victory was not just possible, but inevitable. Soviet soldiers receiving American spam, condensed milk, and dehydrated vegetables through Lend-Lease knew they were backed by an industrial giant. German soldiers, discovering American rations, knew they faced an enemy that could afford to waste what they desperately needed. In the Pacific Theater, this food-based psychological warfare reached almost surreal proportions. American forces developed a tactic of deliberately abandoning food supplies during strategic withdrawals, knowing that starving Japanese soldiers would be unable to resist consuming them. When Japanese forces overran abandoned American positions, they found not meager military rations but canned fruits, chocolate, coffee, cigarettes, luxuries that Imperial Japanese forces had never provided their own troops. The demoralization was immediate and profound. Japanese war diaries recovered after battles frequently mentioned the shock of discovering American food abundance, with many soldiers writing home about the enemy's inexplicable wealth. The ice cream barge became legendary among both American forces and their enemies. These converted concrete vessels, officially designated BRL, barge, refrigerated, large, served the smaller American ships, destroyers and landing craft that lacked their own ice cream production facilities. The psychological impact on enemy forces. The transformation was not merely military, but cultural. American soldiers, accustomed to abundance, expected and received quality food even in combat conditions. This expectation of comfort and quality extended beyond rations to equipment, medical care, and support services. The German and Japanese military tradition of hardship and suffering as character-building virtues suddenly appeared outdated when confronted with an enemy that maintained high living standards even while fighting. As the war progressed, captured enemy documents revealed the demoralizing effect of American food abundance on Axis forces. German intelligence reports noted declining morale among troops who had witnessed American POW camps or discovered American supplies. Japanese military leaders expressed concern about soldiers who had tasted captured American rations, becoming reluctant to fight with the same fanatical devotion that had characterized earlier battles. The K-Ration box, mass-produced in American factories and distributed to foxholes from Normandy to Okinawa, had become more than a container for food. It was a symbol of American industrial supremacy, a cardboard declaration that this nation possessed resources beyond the enemy's comprehension. Inside each box lay not just calories and nutrition, but the promise that America could afford to feed its sons well while they fought to free the world from tyranny. The legacy of food as a weapon extended far beyond military strategy. In post-war Japan, American food aid introduced an entire population to new flavors and ingredients that would permanently alter Japanese cuisine. In Germany, the Marshall Plan's food provisions created lasting gratitude and political alignment. The lesson was clear: an army and a nation marches on its stomach, and America had proven it possessed the strongest stomach of all. The chocolate bar that emerged from that K-Ration box, 4 squares of Hershey's sweetness, wrapped in wax paper, represented something profound about the nature of American power. It was not merely industrial capacity or military might, but the ability to maintain human dignity and comfort even in the depths of global conflict. While enemy soldiers fought with the desperate courage of the starving, American forces fought with the steady determination of the well-fed. The difference, as history would prove, was decisive. In the end, World War II was won not just by superior tactics or advanced weaponry, but by the simple, revolutionary idea that soldiers could eat well even while liberating the world. The K-Ration box, empty now and discarded in some Norman hedgerow or Pacific atoll, had delivered more than sustenance. It had delivered victory itself. One meal at a time, one chocolate bar at a time, one symbol of American abundance at a time. The greatest weapon of the war was not the atomic bomb or the Sherman tank, but the humble proof that democracy could afford to feed its defenders as well as kings, and in doing so, had changed the very nature of warfare forever.